Leadership's provided in all sorts of different ways, I guess. It's obvious to sort of think of leadership as being a kind of cultural phenomenon, almost celebrity phenomenon, that these charismatic people emerge and lead us out of the desert towards the Holy Land. And of course it does sometimes happen that way, but actually leadership in social change is often very, very different, that the leaders emerge out of quite marginalised groups. They don't necessarily wield an awful lot of secular power or political power at the time that transformation takes place. And what that means is that, you know, we should have an eye to leadership in all sorts of different places. That the leaders could be simply the people who are prepared to buck the system, prepared to create meaningful, sustainable lives in ways which lie completely outside the mainstream, but offer us a sort of experiment in social living, offer us a place where we can test out different things, where we can live in different ways, and where we can show that actually it's possible to have a full, meaningful life without necessarily being simply a consumer. And we do see quite a lot of that. I mean, it is extraordinary that there are communities, there are individuals, there are households who make quite intentional choices, quite specific choices to live in a different way, even though it means some sense of sacrifice, what we might call sacrifice. And they are fantastic examples. They are a sense of they're examples of leadership. But one of the lessons we find when we look at those examples is how quickly they run into obstacles, how quickly actually the social structure around them makes it hard for them to live in this particular way, how the institutions actually discourage them from living this way and encourage this rather unsustainable life, how even physical infrastructures like the way we design our towns, our roads and our communication network prevent people from living in a sustainable way. So it's not very practical to think about large-scale change emerging just from highly motivated individuals providing kind of thought leadership. Actually, we need a different kind of leadership, and that leadership has to be it has to come from businesses. It has to come from the way that businesses engage with this agenda, how they create different business models, how they live within those business models, exemplify them, not just lead in the sense of telling us to do or to buy this kind of product or that kind of product. We've heard all that. We've heard it for 100 years or more, businesses trying to persuade us to buy their products. What we need is a different sense of leadership, of leading by doing, leading by acting, leading by example, and we need that too, more than anything else, in government. It's almost impossible to think about wide-scale change, particularly structural change of the kind that we need, without a sense of leadership in government, without a sense government has its own responsibility to keep its own house in order, to have low-carbon government buildings, to reduce its waste, to procure its goods in sustainable ways, and to think about supply chains, but also to provide the infrastructure and the opportunities for ordinary people to create their own leadership. Leadership's it's a sort of sense of distributed leadership in a way, but it will never, ever excuse government from their responsibility, which has to be to create the conditions to make change possible.